Your house is worth whatever it's worth, right? Whoever sells it. Wrong.
I'm Charlie. Welcome to Moving Home with Charlie, and thank you for coming.
Charlie Landing grew up in Sussex, is the founder of Best Agent and presenter of Moving Home with Charlie.
If you want to find one of these guys, look out for those compassionate professionals. All estate agents are not the same.
So Charlie, what would be your advice for people interested in buying new builds right now?
Don't overpay. Do buy, but don't overpay.
That's why I say disregard the guff. Read into the numbers and look, and it's buried. The bad news is buried in the small print, okay?
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Property Press Awards.
They may or may not be telling the truth, but you should form your own view. Get out and view, get out and view, get out and view. You cannot be in a position to make offers and have the offers accepted if you're not viewing. So be out there viewing. Pay attention to the back of the class if you've not been watching my videos. I did one just a couple of days ago. Disregard the guff. Evening, Alex.
Hello, Charlie. How you doing?
I've just been watching the podcast that came out today from the Diary of a CEO, where there are 4 of them talking about AI.
Right.
And I've been watching this whole thing very closely and thinking a lot about it and experimenting with it and using it to a certain extent. And the more I watch and the more I learn, the more I listen to people who know more about it than me talk about it, the more I realize I don't understand and fully grasp the potential of what's coming, both good and bad. But my current thinking on it, and it is relevant to what we're talking about today, because it's relevant to people's ability to make a living.
Yeah.
Amongst all the other stuff that's going to happen, I think that there's going to be a new dividing line between the haves and the have-nots. And that dividing line is going to be oriented in a direction that's never existed before. That dividing line will not recognize privilege, education. It will purely be a dividing line between people who can be bothered to start playing with it, experimenting with it, toying with it, learning about it, and people who can't. Because if you have access to it, no matter who you are, anywhere in the world, you have access to unlimited intelligence and thinking and knowledge and data, and you're limited by your imagination. So no matter who you are, if you simply have the mental energy to go, I'm just going to experiment with this, and you get used to it, then just like the first people who ever tried to get on the back of a horse.
Yeah, but I'm not underestimating how huge it is, because I believe it will have huge impacts, as you said. But you used a word there, you have access to unlimited intelligence, and that is the one thing that you don't have.
Okay.
And in the same way as jumping on the back of a horse, that was the most basic use of a horse ever. And this is what most people are using machine learning for at the moment. They're putting in prompts, they're using it for a bit of research, they're doing this sort of stuff. Now that helps them, and it's useful, but you have to check it, because the machine learning tools are not always accurate, especially when dealing with numbers. But horses really became useful when we learned to harness them so that they could pull plows, and when we put them so that they could actually turn mills and grind things. And that was when they became really useful. In the same way that distinction happens with machine learning. The people who are learning to code with machine learning and then use the self-coding ability to write automated agents that perform tasks for them, so that they're not just writing their own prompts and using it like a typewriter that has a little bit of information behind it. They use it to create automation for themselves in their daily lives, or for other people in terms of apps. That is the step change. And you're quite right. That doesn't come down to education. It is a massive divide. But we've been saying that. I mean, my background is tech, and we've been saying that there will be a divide in tech from the early 80s, people who can and people who can't. And actually, machine learning is going to reduce that divide, because it can do the coding for you. All you have to be able to do is scope it out correctly. And if you look over the 45 years, yeah, sure, there have been people who have found themselves more excluded from society because they have no or little understanding of technology. But the technologists have come up with user interfaces that are so easy to use that you no longer needed to understand the technology. I mean, Apple is a wonderful example where we created an interface that even my 75-year-old mother, who has never had a mobile phone, is now happily snapping photographs and sending them in WhatsApp messages and all this sort of stuff, having only owned a phone for 2 years. So you're right. The people who will really excel and will be able to create automated agents using machine learning with all of that access to all of that data that's on the internet are going to have an absolute advantage. And you see it already in architects' offices. Architects who are working with machine learning to produce all of the terrible, boring calculations that they would have to do so that they can now spend more time just doing the design work. And you get the ML agent to do all of the, every time you have to optioneer a design, it does all that for you. But the creativity, the intelligence still sits with the architect.
Yeah, I agree with that. And this is where, I mean, I think that this most significant value to be gained out of this is when it's going to be the combination of human imagination and the deployment of the available resource together are going to be able to produce things that are of multiple times the value that without it. And the thing is that, you know, we all know, for anyone, no matter who you are, learning new stuff is hard work. It's mental effort. And the older we get and the more children we've got and the more problems we've got, the smaller amount of mental energy we have left over to learn new stuff. And if you're someone that's already not that comfortable with, and you find computers and technology already something you're not comfortable with, you don't easily sort of take to it, then the mere thought of having to start using what?
Yeah.
You're not even going to start. But I mean, just to wrap up this topic, because we've got to get on with other stuff. But I think that I would say this to anybody: if you know how to ask a question, then you can use AI.
Yeah.
Honestly, so if you're watching this, and because I'm hearing wild predictions, I honestly think that actually they're over the top about how fast it's going to eviscerate a large number of white collar jobs. And there's no doubt we've seen it happening already, but just how fast the predictions I'm hearing, I think is too fast. But there are people who are worried, and I just think if you're worried about it, all you could do, just on your own, in the privacy of your own home, with no one else around, you got an AI there, just start asking it questions. Just start asking it questions, whatever's on your mind, and get used to using it. That's what I would recommend. Anyway, never mind that. Put that to one side. Thanks a lot for joining me this evening. And I know I'm already preaching to the choir with you on this, but I've been doing some research in advance of this significant meeting we have for Best Agent next week, where I'm trying to quantify the benefits of a better functioning housing market over and above the obvious benefits to society in terms of, and I started with the most extreme. So there is already a significant, and just a heads up and a warning to the audience, I'm going to talk about a very delicate topic here, right? A very delicate, a very sensitive topic, but it's a very relevant topic for reasons that become clear. The statistics showing that so let's use the word, right? The suicide statistics include a significant proportion. It's not the majority, but it's about a third where financial distress is a factor in the suicide or attempted suicide, right? And of the cases where financial distress was a factor, rent arrears or mortgage arrears are more often than not the largest single item in the debt.
Yeah.
Okay, so I did some number crunching to work out, and it's an approximation of everything else, but in the UK, using the data available, it can be proposed that the number it came up with is 514 preventable or avoidable deaths per year as a result of housing related financial distress. And that's just one item, and that's the most extreme and most acute, right? There are people for whom the sheer costs of housing are tipping them over the edge. Right? It's no one suggesting it's ever the only cause, but in the situations where financial distress is a cause, it's usually the biggest item. And you go down the list of all the other factors, the social factors that are affected by housing. And I started looking at how much, because as you and I know, we've discussed a lot, the market, if you leave the market alone, any marketplace, if you leave it alone, you don't interfere with it, you leave it to natural forces. And of course, with property, the natural forces aren't just supply and demand. It's supply of property and supply of available finance to those who are the demand. It's a more complex relationship. And I crunched some numbers, and I used Grok AI, and it worked out. The question I asked it was, between 2008 and 2023 was the data, the latest data it had. How much of the house price growth in that 15-year period was caused or contributed to by artificial stimulus into the housing market by government policies? And it came up with a figure of between 33 and 50% of the nominal house price growth was a result. And there was data. I can put it up on the screen. We can go through it, right? So if housing affordability, which you and I think agree, and a lot of people agree, is one of the biggest causes of living standards dropping.
Yeah.
And it was caused by people deciding to implement new policies at government level. There is now supposedly evidence to show that these government policies are the number one cause of housing poverty.
Well, of course.
And there's ample evidence to support this, and yet here we are staring in the face of government and FCA talking about yet more lending relaxing restrictions on lending, relaxing restrictions on. So you think that the most important metric on lending is multiples, right? It's the multiple that's the problem. Is that?
Well, no, sorry, no. I mean, you've got to take it as a whole. Between 1997 and 2007, the multiple became the problem. Because we went from an average since 1968 to 1997, the average lending multiple was 4.6 times the average salary. And you can see, and that's a single salary, that's one salary. And you can see from some of the graphs that I've posted onto X exactly where the government intervened between 1968 and 1997. And it went up during Myros, it went up when they deregulated building societies, it went up when they allowed banks to start doing mortgages, it went, and so on and so forth. But the only thing, the thing that stands out enormously was that from 68 to 97, the average was 4.6. From 97 to 2008, it climbed from 4.6 to 7.9 and got as high at one point as 8.8. And then from 2008, you would have expected it to fall back down again because we had the house price crash, we had the financial crisis. So surely lending multiples would have fallen, but they didn't. Instead, what we did was we introduced 0% interest rates. Now, they didn't actually affect the mortgage market for many years, which is why house prices fell in real terms until 2013. Then the government invented or introduced Help to Buy. They pushed shared ownership schemes. They introduced new stamp duty regulation to make it easier. And at the same time, banks still had the ability to lend, not at the way that they'd lent between 97 and 2007 because of the new rules, but they managed to prop it up with low interest rates at that 7.9 times multiple. Now, You can't increase that multiple because that is the end of affordability. But the only way you can keep it is to extend the mortgage term. You couldn't pay a 7.9 times multiple over 25 years because the repayments would be too high. So between 2008 and 2025, actually that 25 years that had been a standard all the way back for 60 odd years beforehand suddenly started to increase, and it increased to an average of 28 years and then an average of 30 years, and it's now an average of 32 years. But they are currently offering 40 to 45 year mortgages because that is the last game in town. It's the last big wheeze. With interest rates going up, if you want to sustain a 7.9 times multiple, the only way you could do it is to increase the term. So now we're tying people into this until they're in retirement, because the average age of a first-time buyer is 34. So if they're taking a 40-year mortgage, that's 74. And estate agents will say, no, don't worry. You will overpay your mortgage and you will pay it off early. Will you fuck? Depending on what happens in your life. So it's not as simple as it's the affordability, the multiples. That is what shows you what's wrong with the market. What is worse is that lenders are being allowed to offer even higher multiples, up to 6 times, or 7 times in one case, but 6 times, with very small deposits and up to 45 years. I mean, people must understand there is actually no upper limit to term in this country. If a lender is willing to lend, they could lend until you were 100 years old. That's at their risk. They could do. We don't have a thing that says, oh, you can't lend a mortgage over more than X years. It's just that our common practice is to lend for 2 and 5 year fixed. They're the most common mortgages in the UK.
So if we carry on as we are, it's just going to keep getting worse.
Yeah. Or we could let the multiples fall, i.e. let house prices fall, and then the younger generation might actually have a fucking chance of owning a home.
Well, it's not just owning a home. I mean, obviously that's the first priority, but it's owning the home and then having enough money left over to live, isn't it?
Yeah.
And this is what I mean. I've got the figures here. I'll just share it on screen and this is just generated from AI. It's from Grok doing the research. And I put a link to this below. There's a link to the tweet where I linked to this below. And I asked it the question. I said, this is worth reading if you're interested in this, right? Because it's government stimulus causing the housing affordability crisis. And it talks about, it's got all the numbers, it's got all the sources. You can go and link to all the sources so you can just do sanity checks yourself. But in a nutshell, it's Help to Buy, QE, and ultra low interest rates. So in other words, negative real interest rates. And the combined impact of it all. And the conclusion, so it's the cumulative impact on disposable income. So after you've afforded your house, right, in that 15-year period, there's £400 billion across 28 million households of just lost disposable income. And so this is the point. What I want people to understand is that when house prices rise faster than wages, so that the house price to wage ratio is going up, that is bad for the economy and for society and for your kids and everything else. Yes. And that's why, as a country, we've got to wean ourselves off our addiction to fast growing house prices, because actually you look back and go, hang on a second, everyone's struggling now, everything seems expensive, etc., etc., etc. Yes, and that is mostly due to excess house price growth. And what's sustainable and sensible is if house prices are growing at the same rate as wages. In fact, if wages grow a bit faster than house prices, that's healthy. House prices don't need to actually come down nominally, although obviously things that creates problems of it in the short term. But if wages are rising faster than house prices, they're becoming more affordable. That gradually is the problem, doesn't it? As long as they don't keep on pumping up how much you can borrow. What have you got there? Got your girl on the screen here. See that?
Yeah, sorry. Yes, your audio is going a bit choppy, mate. At least for me. I don't know if it is in general.
Okay. Well, talk us on the screen.
This is exactly all I was talking about earlier. You can see from April of 1968 through until December of 1999 here, we had an average of 4.6 times a single average wage. And every time there was a boom, it was relaxation of credit controls, building society support, removal of rent controls. Here, MIRAS, the first issue of MIRAS. Then, when MIRAS was expanded to allow £60,000 of property or two 30k tranches per person, you had the big 1990s peak. Then you had the deregulation and the Bank of England no longer regulating banks. The FSA started regulating banks and lending went mad. And we had this huge upward trend, which has then been maintained at 7.9, with more peaks whenever the government has intervened with help to buy and stamp duty holidays, etc. But the only way you can stay, as we were saying, at this level, so 7.9 times a single average wage, the only way we can stay there is by extending terms when interest rates go up. It's not achievable when you have an interest rate of 4.5%. With the current house price, people cannot afford the house price unless they have a long-term mortgage, which then means, as you pointed out, they don't have money to spend in the economy. So we end up forcing ourselves into recession because we tie all of our liquidity up in a house that doesn't have a real value. It only has the value that we put on it. It's not as if you're costing the bricks and mortar. This is what makes it so stupid that we are willing to try and outbid each other and spend £1.6 million on a 3-bedroom terrace of 130 square meters in Fulham. I mean, how does that make sense to anybody? But that money doesn't get spent in the economy. It doesn't get spent on yourself. So people have a lower standard of living in a smaller property, and the economy suffers for it.
Here we are, people living in very expensive houses and they can't afford to heat them.
Exactly.
It doesn't make sense. Everyone's getting worse off. And so now here's my other approach to this, and this is the whole approach, the whole concept behind best agent is one thing that benefits all people in the housing market if there are more transactions. I wish I had a graph. I haven't got it. But the peak of transactions in the last 25 years was in 2006.
I've got it, mate. I'll find it while you're talking.
And it was around about 1.6 million transactions, maybe 1.7. It was, and it hasn't been back there for a long time. Now, if you adjust for the population increase between 2006 and now, which is significant, and if you imagine that we were doing the same number of house transactions per year per person as we were then, there would be 50% more transactions now than there are today. And the reason that the only thing people should care about is the housing market healthy? Are transactions happening? Are there more transactions happening? And are they happening more easily? Is that makes it easier to move home. And if it's easier to move home, social mobility is easier, the cost of moving come down, uncertainty comes down, the time it takes to get a transaction to happen comes down. And the prime culprit I see here at the moment is still this endless pumping of prices in the media. And this endless narrative from people going, house prices are going up, house prices are going up, like it's a good thing. When actually, if you bother to do the research, you can see that house prices going up is harmful if they're going up too fast. Going up at the rate of inflation is about right. But anyone going, hey, house prices are forecast to jump 20%, is like it's like cheering for poverty. It's like cheering for more people who can't pay their mortgage and can't pay their rent. It's like cheering for more people who can't afford to raise a family. Whenever you go, yeah, house prices are going up. it makes you. I'm not going to say it because I'm going to get cross. You got something to share again there? Is that the transaction volumes?
No, this is mortgage approvals per month, but it gives you an idea because you can. I mean, there are obviously cash buyers, but this graph applies the same for cash buyers. Basically, you were looking at about an average of 110,000 mortgage approvals per month back in from sort of 2000 to 2008. So 110,000, you're looking at 1.3 million or whatever it is per year. And then it fell off a cliff down to 60,000 on average. And at the moment, this goes back to September of 23. There are more now, but we're still at around this level of about 60,000. We've never recovered back to where we were pre the financial crash.
So you agree with me, don't you, that higher volume of transactions is better for everyone? It's good for the economy, it's good for social mobility. So this is why I'm campaigning very hard with the agents that I'm talking to say, for the love of all that is holy, will you stop pretending that climbing house prices is good? Stop overvaluing homes. Stop caring about prices. Just talk about moving and getting people moved. You need to move house, I'll help you move house.
Yeah.
The price is an incidental. It's an important thing. It's part of the thing, but it's not the be all and end all. And so I want to change the conversation in the housing market away from prices and towards transactions, because actually the price is whatever the price is going to be, right? And this is the most stupid thing about it, is talking about prices doesn't change prices. It's a complete waste of time. It's a red herring. The market is what the market is. And everyone watching this who's got their house on the market wondering why it's not selling, it's because your price is too high. And your price is too high is because all the media you've seen is about prices are high, and they're going up, and record prices. I just want to try and change the message and change the story. But the prices are whatever the market determines the prices to be, right? And if the government doesn't stimulate too much, then maybe house prices will start to ease. Guess what happens if house prices start to ease? More people will buy them. And if you're an agent or a mortgage broker, you will sell more homes and you will sell more mortgages and you will make more money if house prices don't go up. Okay, the numbers are there to back it up. As estate agents and mortgage brokers, you will make more money if house prices stop going up. There's this misconception amongst agents that people will only buy because they think prices are going up. No, people buy because they need a king home. That's why people buy. And the demand for people to buy a home is massive. There is this enormous amount of demand that's restricted only by prices. And if the prices weren't high, more people would buy, more people would sell their homes. So this is the message you've got to keep on getting out there. Like, the market determines the price, right? Whether you're a buyer or whether you're a seller, the market determines the price. And whether you're a buyer or whether you're a seller, the better prepared you are when you come to the market determines how well you will experience the market. So if you come to the market well prepared as a seller, you will sell more quickly at a higher price. And if you come to the market better prepared as a buyer, you will get your offer accepted more quickly at a better price. So be prepared. What have we got here?
This is actually transactions for all new purchase versus remortgage, and you can see, it just from 01 to 03, the green line is remortgages. You can see people started taking all of those mad deals to take money out because remortgages actually, got to the point where they were almost as high as purchases. Interest rates were falling, people were offering cashback deals, and so the remortgage market really took off. But again, across the board, okay, so it's 120,000 on average, not the 110 we were talking about, but it's the same story in terms of the purchases. They just fell off a cliff, and the only time they've come back is the interference during 21 when COVID money was being splashed about. and Rishi decided to do stamp duty holidays. Sorry, it wasn't Rishi. Yes, it was Rishi. He was Chancellor. Yeah.
I found the graph. that I wanted to show you. Here it is. Okay, so that's actual UK residential property transactions. Is that showing on the screen? Yeah.
Yep.
Yes. So that's the blue bars are property transactions per year starting in 2005. So you can see 2006, 1.4 million. The red line is population. So you can see population has grown, but transaction volumes haven't. So the potential exists if we can remove all the barriers to moving, the transaction volumes to get back up to 1.4 million plus another 10%. So another 1.5, 1.6 million transactions a year. And if you were to remove stamp duty, it's going to go even higher. And the other point is, and I'm trying to put the data for this together as well, is that if everyone who wanted to move home could move home, right? If prices were allowed to settle to their natural market value and everyone could move home and transaction times took 8 weeks instead of 20 weeks, then that would stimulate the economy in a genuinely positive way. It would create jobs. It would create an increase in the tax take. It would create an increase in economic activity at a local level, because people moving house do a lot of what I call collateral spending, right? Over and above the fees they have to pay, that's when people spend the most. And I know this because advertisers target home movers, because home movers are the biggest spenders on white goods, furniture, all that kind of stuff. So there's this. This is the point. This fix to the housing market, because of course, my motto is fix housing, fix everything. The fix to the housing market is if you can unlock or remove the friction of housing market transactions, many more people would move home, and that would genuinely stimulate the economy in a healthy, not because of artificial stimulus way, and it would unlock so many other problems as well. So, yeah, we've got some comments and questions here.
Well, Brian Wolf, I don't think Labour want high house prices. Well, what they're trying to do exactly as with Blair, they will end up pumping house prices. If you relax lending, that's what happens. In terms of everyone renting, I've been on record with you, Charlie, as saying I think we will end up with shelter as a service, and people will not own and they will end up renting. However, realistically, how do you rent when you're retired, when the state pension is no longer viable because the country has no money? Without ownership, we then are in a place where I guess what you're suggesting is that rentals will be paid for old people. And by old, I mean anyone of retirement age, which by then will probably be 70 or 72. And they better hope that they die very fast. Because, home ownership is one of the most important securities for people who are no longer working. So it's an interesting conundrum. I'm not suggesting you're wrong. I think myself that ownership is on the decrease. It's fallen from 71% to 62%. And I think it'll continue to fall. But don't think that's a good thing necessarily.
No, I agree. I'm all for home ownership, ultimately for home ownership. How you get there are several different routes to it, but owning your own home outright is one thing, never mind the financial side of it. And this is the point. I wish everyone would just forget about the fact, stop thinking that it's a financial investment, right? It's just a wonderful thing to own the home you live in, if it's a home that you're happy in, of course. Andrew Dennis asks, how stamp duty going to affect the market? House prices up. Stamp duty is a tax on moving. Therefore, it deters a lot of people from moving, especially downsizers. But they look at the downsizing and go, okay, we want to downsize 1.5 million to, let's say, 750,000. The stamp duty on a £70,000 purchase is horrible. It's very. I should know off the top of my head, but I don't. But it's often 6 figures of stamp duty, and nobody will hand over that amount of their savings and their wealth to the government as a moving tax, and it is literally a moving tax.
No, well,
And
let's just do the. Sorry, you keep talking. I'm just going to do the maths on a friend who difficult situation for them, family issues, health, and so on and so forth. And I'll give you the exact numbers because it made my eyes water when we talked about it at the weekend.
Well, yeah, I'm just looking at people. I do feel for sellers. And by the way, all of you who watch this channel, if you've been selling and you've followed my advice and you've had a successful sale quickly at a good price because you have multiple offers, thank you so much for sharing the stories with me. And every single time I get someone who says, I followed your advice exactly, how I chose the agent, how we priced it, everything else. We got competing offers. It was under offer within 2 or 3 weeks. Thank you for listening. This is unimpartial, free advice. So if you're not listening to me, have a word with yourself, because if you're not listening to me, it's probably because you just don't want to believe that your house isn't worth what you think it is, and you don't want to believe that maybe it's overvalued because you think you've gone through a healthy process of valuing it, and you've been really. I mean, how many times have I heard the expression, "We know what our house is worth, it just won't sell"?
Yeah.
If you're a seller watching this thinking you know what your house is worth, how do you know what it's worth? Because if it's on the market and it's not even getting viewings, let alone offers, the market's telling you it's not worth what you think it is.
Yep.
And what I've seen a lot of sellers do is they go to this logic, this very deeply flawed logic of, well, we paid this, we spent that, and house prices have gone up this because Halifax said they've gone up this percent. So we factor all that in. This is all logical and rational. We're being very reasonable about it. And therefore, we've arrived at this very fair value. And indeed, even the agents agree with us on the value. So the agents agree and we've thought it through. So it's not us. It's not the value. There's just no buyers. It's always the price. It may also be other things, like there might be problems with the property, but it's always the price. And I put a post up on X a couple of days ago about how so many people selling their homes who renovated or redecorated 10 years ago still believe their house is up to date and modernized. But buyers looking at it going, well, we're going to need to repaint that. We need to redo the kitchen, redo the bathroom. And renovation costs and refurbishment costs and that kind of stuff has shot up in the last 5 years. And that money, that increase in refurb and maintenance costs and renovation costs is coming off buyers' budgets.
Yeah.
Because you've got to look at the inflation cost of those costs. And again, there's just a lot of people out there who have been misled. And I'm not blaming them. I'm not in any way mocking a seller who thinks they've actually tried to value it reasonably. And the agents that I'm working with, they're coming up against sellers all the time who are just sellers who are saying, we understand that the market decides, we're being realistic. And then there are properties coming to the market at prices that even the agent and the seller both think are really realistic. And they are getting viewings, no offers. Right? There's one property I know in particular where the seller said, happy to put it on the market at whatever you think we needed to get viewings. And they did, and they got 30 viewings. And with 30 viewings, not one offer. And that has absolutely blindsided the agent. Like, we can't remember that happening before. Not a single offer. And they sort of had to go back and figure out it was to do with something weird about the property. There's something weird about the property that somehow the seller and the agent had overlooked, and it put all the buyers off.
I mean, that is incredible. 30 and not one.
30 viewings and not a single offer. And what the agent is now going is, right, we genuinely thought that was priced aggressively, and we're going to have to take another 15 to 20% off it.
Yeah. Wow.
I also had, and if you're watching, hi Jenny, I had a private one-to-one video call because I do these, and Alex, another Alex, I know we've got we have to have our video call maybe tomorrow. But the one-to-one videos I have with people, and it's fascinating, and the thing that never ceases to amaze me is how unique each set of circumstances is. And the discussion that I got into with one person on this call was the buying versus renting. They have cash. It's 100% cash. There's no mortgage. It's a medium to long term purchase. Probably not the forever one, but for the foreseeable future.
Yeah.
And the concern was, is this the best use of the capital? Is this the best use of the money? Because guess what? It's going to be a leasehold flat in London. And this person is being very, very cognizant of the fact that leasehold flats in London are not doing well and are not projected to go up, but they need to buy a home. And so the discussion was, am I going to lose more money by buying a leasehold flat and living in it for X years than I'm going to lose if I rent and invest the money instead? And we really dug deep into this, the pros and cons, and it was really interesting. Because that the particular budget, the particular area of London, and everything else. Again, these are all unique factors in the situation, and we arrived at the conclusion that actually the equation between buying and renting for someone who's buying with cash and is accepting that there's going to be no real growth in the value. If there is, there'll be an unexpected bonus, right? It's like, but there's going to be and therefore the money being used to buy it is going to devalue effectively. Is it going to devalue by more than the rent would cost? And I said, well, don't forget there are going to be maintenance costs too. Yes, and there are service charges. There's service charges, which is basically like rent, isn't it? It's like a small amount of rent you're paying a service charge when you're in it, and you've got maintenance costs, and you've got the devaluing of the property because house prices aren't going up as fast as inflation, especially leasehold flats in London. And crunching the numbers, like renting, genuinely, if it was purely for financial reasons, renting was actually looking safer financially in that particular set of circumstances.
Yes,
and it's just fascinating. It's really, really fascinating. And we ended up going, well, look, let's go and look for a higher value flat that's been on the market for a long time. That if you get it for a bargain, then you're less worried about the devaluing because you've got someone that's better than you expected to live at a lower price. That's worth the premium. That's worth it. So again, you've got to mix the non-financial pros and cons with the financial pros and cons, and it's complicated. And what happens when these people have booked the calls with me is like it's just helping them straighten their head out. There's so many different factors, and they just it's very difficult to get it all in line. Anyway, Joel Didcott Williams says, I've given up house hunting after 27 years of renting. I'm moving into my van for the next 5 years, then moving on to land. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Don't know what to say to that. It's
No.
sort of a sign of the times, isn't it? Just looking for any other questions. Yeah, Hannah says, I also feel bad for anyone in their 40s or 50s that have rented their entire life and now can't afford a home. Yeah. Oh God, the audio. I've got really good internet here. I can't believe the audio is bad. It's not my internet connection. It must be something to do with this streaming. I'm sorry about that, guys. Is the audio get better now, Alex?
No, it's more that you're out of sync sometimes.
Okay.
No, I mean,
wow.
Hannah, it's not just people who've been renting all their lives in their 40s and 50s. There are people who get divorced, and there's other situations where they suddenly find that they are long-term renters, which has never been a plan.
Yeah, absolutely. I also did a post. Did you see about couples who get a prenuptial agreement in place
Are less likely to get divorced?
Are much less likely to get divorced, which was interesting. It's not surprising when you think about it, because it's people being pragmatic, and therefore pragmatic people are less likely to get divorced in the first place.
Exactly.
I was going, oh, it's a dream, it's a romantic dream, we're getting happy for we've all been there, haven't we? We've all been there. Ronnie Birmingham says, I follow instruction strategy and offer 50k less for £390,000 for detached house in the East Midlands. Send my offer as per your email template and got it accepted in 24 hours.
Fantastic.
Amazing. That's what it's there for, guys. That's what that template is there for. It does often work. Not always, but it gives you a chance. Wow. Con says our apartment in Cheshire 11 months ago for £80,000 and sold it after 30 days in the market for £102,000. As you say, the market, the property, what it is realistically worth. Okay. Well done. You made a nice little turnaround on that. Did you do it up, Connor? Was that did you buy it and tart it up and sell it, or wow. Clement Boraski says, if I didn't have a family, I honestly would be considering the van life. The majority of millennials still aren't starting families. Yeah. And that, again, that creates another major social problem, doesn't it? When it's too expensive to have a family, we end up with too many old people, not enough young people.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. All right, mate. Well, listen, that was I'm just. Can you? Have you got any questions that you want to ask, Alex? I'll answer.
I've just been looking through now. I think guys are answering their own questions, which is pretty good. I quite like the buy 5 acres in Wales and live off grid. That doesn't sound so bad.
Martin Turner says he thinks Labour will bring back Help to Buy.
God, I hope not.
I hope not, and I'm hopeful that they won't do that, because every time they talk about it, it actually gets a very negative reaction. And people realizing that actually it's not Help to Buy, it's Help to Sell, and it just moves prices further out of the reach of more buyers.
If we've got 10 minutes, and
Yeah.
if your audience are at all interested, so shout if you're interested. I can have a brief rant about affordable housing, co-living, and what it's like with planning and developers, and why the world of build to rent, etc., is pretty much as fucked as everything else.
Go for it, Alex.
Well, let's see if anyone's actually interested in that.
I'm interested. My channel, stuff the audience. I want to hear it.
Well, okay. So I'll give you a clue. Depending on your land value, you obviously are either at an advantage or disadvantage when it comes to building residential, because the more expensive the land value, the more you're going to have to sell the eventual properties for. And the only way you can do that in a market like, and this is why developers are not building, by the way, the reason that the build numbers are so low and brick deliveries are so low is because it's very hard to turn a profit. And one of the reasons it's very hard to turn a profit is that a lot of councils now are demanding that, let's say you've got a pretty large site. Let's say you've got 200 units. You're a Taylor Wimpey or whatever it may be, or a Barratt Homes, and you're going to build 200 units on an acre of land, a couple of acres of land. They want 40% of the properties that you bring to market. So 40% of those 200 units have to be affordable housing. Now, what does that mean? What's affordable housing? Well, it means that they have to rent or sell at 20% below market rate. And you go, okay, right. So therefore, what we'll do is we'll cut the costs in the construction, because the only way we can do that is if we make 2-bedroom flats 65 square meters and 3-bedroom flats 75, 80 square meters, and they're all pretty tiny, and they're going to look pretty boxy because it's cheaper to build and the cladding is cheaper and all the rest of this good stuff. And that's the only way that we could make up this 20% below market rate, because otherwise, with the construction costs and the land costs and everything else you want in planning. And the council goes, no, sorry, we didn't explain ourselves well enough. We want 40% to be affordable, but you can't do that as build to rent. You can't build 40% of those 200 units. So you can't go out and build 80 units and sell that to a company that will manage them, because we don't want to have any more than 10% build to rent in anything. So of the 200 units, only 20 of them can be built to rent. And you go, well, what? Why? No. We want the others to be social rented and private rented. It's like, sorry, you want us to have affordable housing as private rented, so it's got to be 20% below market rate, but it's a private. I'm sorry, I'm confused. Could you explain this to me like I'm really simple?
So
Yes.
This is the council saying this.
This is the planning officers. This is your local planning authority that sit there and they go, well, no, we don't like that. We like this. And you go, well, that's wonderful. But you do understand with the cost of the land and the cost of the build, the cost of design, the cost of planning, and the fact that you've just hit me with an S106, that means that I have to contribute social value to the community, and you want X million pounds for this and X million pounds for that.
Like roads and like that.
Exactly. I can't make a profit. There is no way that I can make a profit. And they go, did we not mention that we need a demographic study as to who is going to rent these or buy these properties? And you go, why? Well, because, if it's likely to be young professionals and they're likely to have children, then we're going to want playing fields as part of the development. And you go, but we haven't got enough land for playing fields because we're trying to actually make some money on this. They go, that's all right. You can buy some more land and turn it into playing fields. And you go, again, this is not viable. We should be making a return. We would expect for build to rent to make a return in somewhere between 8 to 12 years. You would have paid off the cost of development and be starting to make money. But with all of these things that you're putting on here, it's going to be 20 to 25 years before this shows any profit. So I'll tell you what we'll do. We just won't fucking build. How's that? And so when people complain about developers land banking and they complain about developers overcharging and they complain about all these things, yeah, I agree. There is part of that is true, but a developer is a business. Affordable housing does not. I've seen affordable housing in Whitechapel, and bear in mind, this is affordable, okay? Affordable. It's a 2-bedroom flat at the bottom of a 12-story tower surrounded by other tall buildings. So there is no light. It actually is illegal in light terms. And that affordable housing is 20% below market, is £520,000 to live in a darkened cave on the ground floor. And you go, I don't think that's actually all that fucking affordable. This is not Mayfair. This is fucking Whitechapel, you bastards. So we've got so many issues that covers every type, which is why most developers now on big sites are looking at co-living. And co-living, Charlie, is as close to my shelter as a service as you can possibly get. Co-living is when you build these apartments with maybe 2 or 3 bedrooms in them, and they are effectively studio flats with a communal sitting room and area, and people are renting these units at £1,200 a room because it's the only way the developers can guarantee to make the cash. So co-living sounds like shelter as a service, sounds like, you're going to be stuck in some grotty shithole for the rest of your life.
If it looks like a duck and quacks like a duck.
Yeah.
Okay, so what I'd like to know is, number one, do Angela Rayner's proposed changes to planning law help any of these problems? That's my first question.
Well, none that I've seen.
So of the proposed changes to planning law, it's not going to affect any of the things you just listed that are actually the real life problems?
As far as I can see, no.
So what in your mind, what's the probability of the home building target being hit?
Oh, 0. Well, that's been the case from the beginning.
Well, I know, but it's even more 0 now than it was, isn't it?
Oh, yes. Actually, house building is decreasing, not increasing in the last year. There have been fewer new builds completed in the last 9 months of a Labour government than there have in the year beforehand. So it is, the brick deliveries are an absolute joke.
Second question. Are the councils who are imposing these rules on the developers doing so for their own local government reasons, or because those are the rules mandated by central government?
Both. The problem is these people are so divorced from reality that they actually think what they're doing is going to be helpful.
Oh, really?
They honestly believe, even and when you take
sorry, you talking about the Labour government?
No, sorry, I'm talking about planning authority now. The planners, I have never met. Sorry, that's not strictly true. In the main, every planner that I have met is a nice person. I can't hear you, Charlie. Something's off with the
I
sound.
I didn't say anything. I was listening to you.
Yeah. So yeah, by and large, all the planners I met are lovely, but none of them have any interest or idea in finance, and so they recommend things, and they go, "Well, the unicorn fairies will pay for that. Underneath that land is a pot of gold."
Yeah.
You know, and so it's not that anyone, I think the government, the main targets are wrong. The things that are set from the center are wrong. When they're implemented locally, it is generally with goodwill. You know, it is, they simply don't understand. Even on the commercial side, where you're building offices or lab buildings, you know, the planners go, "Oh, well, can we have some more articulation on that building? You know, we want grain, we want to make it look different." It's like, guys, I understand, and that is what our architects will do. But whenever you change the edges of a building and the heights of different structures, you introduce a factor which means that your sustainability targets are much harder to meet, because actually the easiest thing to build and to heat and to repair is a square box. You know, every time you change it into a weird looking shape, you're making all of those targets harder to meet, and you're making it more expensive. Oh, but it'll fit with the grain of the urban environment better. Well, that's wonderful. But which target do you want us to miss? Would you like us to miss the sustainability embodied carbon target? Or we could miss the biodiversity net gain target? Or we can miss the energy efficiency target? Or we can miss the financial viability target and have our backers tell us to go fuck ourselves into the ground? Which one would you prefer?
So you could take a magic wand and a wrecking ball to the problem. What would you do?
Oh, it is tough, but you need to root and branch, go through the whole planning process. I mean, that building in Whitechapel that I was talking about, supposedly on a scheme that size, planning, we should have gone to committee 16 weeks after submission, 16 weeks. And we should have had an answer very shortly after that, which is at that point we would have started to negotiate the S106, which is all of your communal and reserve matters and other stuff people don't need to worry about. But we would have had 16 weeks from submission to committee and preliminary decision. It took over 18 months to get to committee and 2 years to get a decision. That means that developer has been sitting on £2.5 million of spent design cost, plus the cost to purchase the land in the first place, with no ability to get the hell out there and build the thing that could make them money. So the only way you can be a developer today is to be a big company that's very rich. Because I would love to see in this country lots of small, medium-sized home builders, people who only knocked out 30 or 40 houses a year. They had their own team of employed staff, not subcontractors. I'd love to see that. But these poor fuckers haven't got a chance because they can't buy the land and wait 2 years and spend £200,000 on the planning permission because they haven't got that money sitting in a bank.
So government is the problem.
Yes.
It really is, isn't it? Honestly, just looking at this objectively and removing all political ideologies either way, if government got out of the way, things would work better. If they just kind of did minimal governing, just basic protections, things would be a lot better. But the trouble is, there's too many jobs for the boys now, isn't it?
Yeah, well, there do seem to be a lot of people. And what's wonderful is you'll get councils where on one hand they will say, "Oh, yes, no, we would love you to do that. This is a scheme we'd love to back." and then a different department will rock up and go, no, you can't possibly be. It's like, hang on, this department gave us a grant to specifically do this. And the other one goes, no, don't think that's a good idea. Hold up for 6 months. So, right hand, left hand, no idea.
Would you just answer this comment from Mike Dellington, who says it's very obvious new builds are being built on the cheap for enhanced profits? It's not actually quite fair, is it? I mean, yes,
No,
there are
it's not.
very big. Yeah, go on.
It's not that they are being built on the cheap for enhanced profits. They are being built on the cheap because it is the only way to make any profit. The option is either you are using low quality materials and they are shittily turned out on expensive land, and you end up with making your return not in 8 years, as you might hope, but in 12 years, which is the maximum window that is viable for an investment on a build to rent, for instance. Or if you've got cheap land somewhere, if you're out in the countryside, you've got cheap land, you might be able to build a slightly better quality of home. But if you're actually anywhere in the south, east in particular, you're going to end up on very expensive land. And that means you probably end up with the cheapest, nastiest builds on some of the most expensive land in the country, because it's the only way they can make a profit.
Yeah. Right. I'm very conscious that there are time limits this evening, so we've been going to over an hour. Thank you, mate. Thank you very much, as ever, for your wisdom and wit.
Not feeling so witty at the moment, but there you go.
Patricia makes a very, very valid observation that now people understand when developers subcontract can't afford to employ staff to sod all until all the approvals are granted.
Correct. Exactly that.
Yeah. All right, guys. Thanks for watching. Bit of an unusual topic this evening. Hope you enjoyed it. Remember, fix house, fix everything. If you're selling, don't have a price. If you're buying, don't have a pay. And if you worry about AI, start asking questions.
Yeah, exactly.
Mate, talk to you on the next one. Until everyone else, thank you very much. Remember, there are links below if you want to find where you can time with me to get advice, or link to the first-time buyer template and everything else. And otherwise, have a good night and see you in the next video.